Hey everybody, I'm Greg Soul and I'm here with another CIQ demo. So today I'm going to be showing you how to do custom dynamic inventory sources inside of Ascender. So what exactly does that mean? You probably have some CMDB, right, configuration management database, some system somewhere that stores all of your information about your host, whether it be your networking stuff or your server infrastructure or security, whatever it happens to be. You probably have some system out there that's maintaining that. And if there's not something off the shelf, there is a way for you to build a custom dynamic inventory script to pull that stuff in. So let me show you mine really quick. Here is mine, and it is written in Python, and I'm going to actually go over this in a little bit more detail momentarily. But first, I want to show you, once you actually have it created, how simple it is to get inside of Ascender and start actually pulling those hosts in. So first, you add your Python scripts to a Git repository, right? Some kind of SCM, you add a project for it. So in my Ascender, I've named it Dynamic Custom Inventory Demo. And my script is going to be in a public Git repository, so you'll have access to all of this as well. So if you want to kind of pick up from mine and kind of tweak and tune, feel free to do that. Once you have your project created, that's going to pull in that Python script into Ascender, we create an inventory. Here I have one called the Dynamic Custom Inventory Demo. So I'm going to pop into that. As you can see, I don't have any hosts. I don't have any groups, right? It's just all I did was create it. I clicked add and then gave it a name and click save. Nothing crazy there. So it's pretty much empty right now. Well, how do I actually attach a dynamic inventory script to this inventory? I do it via the sources tab right here. So in sources, I click add. I give it a name. I'm going to call it JSON parser, because that's what I'm doing. I'm returning a JSON payload and I'm going to be parsing it. So choose a source sourced from a project. I'm going to choose the project, click the little next button there. Got my dynamic custom inventory script. Remember, project points to my Git repository. Once I do that, I'm going to choose my inventory file, and it's custom_inventory.py. After that, I can click save and I'm done. Now, while it's saving, I'm going to go ahead and click edit, because I wanted to talk about a couple of options you actually have in here. So overwrite, this is basically every time it synchronizes where it's going to run this script and pull stuff in, it's basically going to wipe out what you have in there and replace it with what is returned. So if you have some hosts that you've manually added in there or any variables or things like that, those are all going to get blown away, and the contents of whatever is returned from the script is actually going to get put in place, right? So if you're going to check that, be sure you know what you're kind of doing there. And remember, you have the check marks right here. Override variables, this is just going to, for the individual hosts, it will wipe any variables that are in there and replace them via what's pulled from that script. Update on launch, this one can actually be pretty useful too. What this tells Ascender to do is anytime any piece of automation is launched that's using this inventory, pause first and fire this dynamic inventory script, right? So it'll go and it'll pull and make sure you've got all those freshest versions of those hosts. So it's actually pretty useful in most regards. So once you have that in there, you can click sync and you can see its job status is running, and it actually pops into the job menu. So while you're developing this, if you run into any errors or you need to kind of see what's going on, you can actually click on running right here. It'll take you to the job menu and you can see the output of the run. So if you do run into errors, they're going to show up right here. But it looks like it's successfully synced. And I can tell you, or rather I can show you, this is the JSON that it's pulling from. I've got 5 hosts in here, this JSON payload. You can see they have a host name, IP addresses, status, OS, owner. It's got all kinds of various information for all 5 of these hosts. So let me see if it successfully pulled that in. I can check by going into inventory, go back into my dynamic custom inventory. Now let's take a look at the host tab. All right, all 5 of my hosts actually got pulled in. And that's great. And I can click on them and I can see all of this additional information, right? All those extra variables were kind of pulled in, which I think is really useful. But if I take a look at just the host tab right here, I can see related groups. I actually augmented my script so that it would dynamically add my host into groups based on what OS was set for them there. So you can imagine that can be extremely useful if I'm doing it for server infrastructure, right? I know what's Linux or Windows, or I could say maybe Rocky or Ubuntu or whatever it happens to be. In the networking world, I could say, oh, this thing is Cisco iOS or Cisco iOS XR, right? Or this is Arista, right? So you can really start kind of channeling those things into different groups. Well, those groups could have varying connection information. So for Windows hosts, you're going to use WinRM. You're going to have not a whole host, but a handful of settings specific to those Windows hosts, but you could add it to the group. So that way, as hosts dynamically get pulled into your inventory, they're going to inherit those specific settings, right? It makes things very convenient. Now, let's break down this script just a little bit more. So this really and truly in your environment is going to be something that's pulled. I just kind of artificially made up some dummy data. This isn't actually pulling from a CMDB. And you can see I'm keeping it here in my Git repository. So I'm actually parsing it from file. I'm not actually connecting to a source and pulling it. It just makes my testing and demo just a little bit cleaner. In your environment, again, you're probably going to be pulling from an API or something like that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an API you're connecting to. As long as you can get to that data, right? As long as you can pull it, you can access it in some format, whether you're dynamically connecting and pulling it right now, or some system is pulling it and sticking into some kind of file format. As long as you can get to that, you can parse it with your scripts and you can pull it into your inventory. So I've got simple list of hosts for living under the host variable. I've got all these hosts with all their associated information. So let me pull into my script. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a Python developer. I'm not going to pretend like I even put that much effort in here. What I actually did was I went into ChatGPT and I asked it to parse this information for me. And I'll show you exactly what I did. I copied all the information. So I have this dummy JSON payload. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go into ChatGPT and I will say, create a custom dynamic inventory scripts for Ansible to process following JSON payload. How about as if it's being returned from an API? In reality, I'm just doing it via file. I'm going to paste in that JSON payload. Now, as you can see, it didn't nail it right off the blocks. It went ahead and stuck that JSON payload in here in this section, and I can ask it to clarify this a little bit, or give me kind of a standard, hey, pull this information in. But it should still be able to digest all this. So it's setting up my inventory section, which is great. You can see it's decided to do active and inactive hosts. I can modify that a little bit if I want to, but here's the core of it, right? It's actually looping through the host data, right? That host variable, and it's saving it as host. It's grabbing all that information. It's adding it to the various inventory pieces, and it is sticking them into active or static sections. So, or active or inactive, I should say. Now mine does something very similarly, right? So I could keep throwing stuff at ChatGPT and asking it to rewrite it for me. But I've actually got a pretty decent template that I like that I'm building from. So right here, again, the intro sections are all pretty much going to look the same for these. I'm setting up my Ansible inventory, right? Just kind of that data structure for that variable right there. Now I'm creating a variable called OS group. So that is a dictionary that I'm initializing because I'm actually going to be grouping things by OS group, right? Like OS type. So I'm setting a variable kind of null one, or not null, but just an empty variable for that. Next, I'm going to be looping through the host, and I'm grabbing all of the information and I'm just kind of sticking it in arbitrary variables. Next, I am adding all of the hosts to the all group, and then I'm setting up the host vars. And so remember, a host var section is whenever you're in an inventory, like right here and I click on an individual host, all these variables down here, these are the host vars. So I'm really just setting up kind of what variables are going to get attached to every individual host as it gets saved into the inventory. So I'm setting all of that up, adding that in, and then right here, I'm actually looping through and I'm processing for my groups. So right here, I say, hey, if the OS that's in the OS variable section here, if it doesn't already exist in my dictionary, go ahead and add it really quick. That's what it's doing right there. Nothing too crazy with that. Next, it's saying, okay, for this individual host, go ahead and stick it in a group of that OS. So Linux or Windows in my example. After that, it just basically saves and then closes everything out, and that's it, right? So I could be pulling in thousands of hosts. I could having them dynamically group based on their inventory type if I wanted to, rather OS type, I guess, in this example. I could also, remember, I could change any of this information because really I'm just grouping based on one of the variables that's returned. So if I take a look right here, I have OS. I could also be grouping based on owner, or I could be grouping based on status, or if this was a Cisco device, I could be grouping based on OS type, right? Or location. I could do group location based on what data center this stuff happens to be, what geographic region. Any of that information, right, is fair game for grouping as well as sticking into the host var section. And I'm a big fan of putting more information in the host vars because you never know when you might want to use it, right? It's not usually a problem to have more information. Oftentimes you run into problems when you have less information. So this is just a kind of quick and dirty example of how you would create a custom dynamic inventory source. If you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them, how you would tweak this for your environment, how you would tune it, maybe how you've done interesting things like this in your environment and maybe from some unexpected sources. I would love to hear about that too. If nothing else, happy automating, happy inventorying, happy dynamic scripting, and we'll see you next time. Bye.